The air inside courtroom 322 grew heavy, every whisper swallowed by tension. Then a voice rang out, deep and unwavering, even as a pair of callous black hands trembled around an old mop. "I will defend him!" All eyes turned. There stood Walter Gibson, the 65-year-old courthouse janitor, a man long invisible in the halls of justice, dressed in faded navy work pants and a light blue shirt with maintenance stitched across the pocket. He was the last person anyone expected to see challenging the system. At the defense table sat Marcus Reed, the billionaire founder of quantum core technologies. Once gracing magazine covers with his piercing blue eyes and confident smile, now he sat alone, abandoned. His $16 billion zero-cents empire hung in the balance as fraud charges threatened to obliterate everything he had built. And to make matters worse, his entire legal team, 6 prestigious attorneys from Preston Holloway and Schmidt, charging $6,000 0 cents an hour, had simply vanished. No warning, no call, nothing. Even Judge Harriet Coleman, stern and battle-hardened after 30 years on the bench, couldn't mask her shock. The prosecution smirked, already tasting victory. "Your Honor," Catherine Williams said smoothly, "it appears the defense has abandoned their client. We move for a default judgment." But just as the gavel hovered, Walter Gibson stepped forward, parting the sea of murmurs and mocking laughter. "I am not here to play lawyer," Walter said firmly. "I was a member of the New York Bar for 15 years. My license is still valid. I've kept up my continuing education, just in case." The courtroom gasped. Some sneered, others leaned forward, captivated. For the first time in his privileged life, Marcus Reed had to make a choice: accept the services of a janitor or face destruction alone. Looking at Walter's weathered face, the gray at his temples, the sharp intelligence in his eyes, and above all, the unshakable resolve etched in his jaw, Marcus swallowed his pride. "Yes, Your Honor," he said softly but clearly. "I accept Mr. Gibson as my attorney." And with that single decision, an unlikely alliance was born, one that would not only fight a legal battle, but rip open America's darkest secrets. If you believe justice belongs to everyone, rich or poor, powerful or powerless, hit that like button and subscribe, because what comes next will shake everything you thought you knew about truth and power. The moment Judge Coleman reluctantly allowed Walter Gibson to sit at the defense table, the courtroom erupted with whispers, smirks, and laughter. A janitor in an outdated suit with wide lapels and fraying cuffs, daring to step where only seasoned corporate attorneys usually sat. To the prosecution team, it was a spectacle. To the press, it was free entertainment. But for Marcus Reed, it was the only lifeline left. As Walter leaned in close, his voice was steady but low. "Something isn't right about any of this," he whispered. "Your lawyers didn't just walk away. This feels orchestrated." Marcus blinked, still struggling to process what was happening. "What makes you say that?" Walter's eyes, sharp and seasoned from decades of watching trials unfold from the sidelines, didn't waver. "I've spent 20 years cleaning these rooms. I've seen how real cases collapse, and yours, from the very beginning, it smelled wrong." That night, as the trial recessed, Marcus left the courtroom with a new companion by his side, a man he never imagined would represent him. Outside, the prosecution strutted with confidence, their leather briefcases gleaming under the fluorescent lights. Several snickered openly at Walter's old-fashioned attire, the kind of elitist sneer Marcus himself had once given to those beneath him. For the first time, Marcus felt the sting of that arrogance turn back on him. He looked at Walter and whispered a quiet thank you. Walter didn't smile. He simply replied, "Everyone deserves a fair defense, Mr. Reed, even billionaires." The next morning, Walter's battered Toyota Corolla pulled up at the gates of Marcus's Westchester estate. 20 acres of pristine lawns and a 14,000-square-foot mansion that screamed wealth. The security guard eyed Walter's car with disdain, chuckling. "And you are?" "Walter Gibson, his attorney." The guard smirked. "Yeah, right. Reed's attorneys drive Mercedes, not this junk." Walter didn't flinch. He simply insisted the guard call Marcus, and after a tense pause, the gates swung open. But even inside, Walter was made to wait outside in the cold for 15 long minutes before another guard allowed him entry. It was a small humiliation, but one Walter endured with quiet dignity, the kind he had grown used to his entire life. When Marcus greeted him in his sprawling home office, lined with awards and patents, his first question revealed how differently these two men lived. "Coffee?" Walter shook his head. "We don't have time for that. I've got to be back at the courthouse for my shift." Marcus frowned. "You're still working as a janitor while defending me?" Walter answered simply. "I can't afford not to. Now, show me everything related to your case." At first, Marcus slipped into old habits, explaining basic legal procedures as though Walter had forgotten them. The condescension was subtle, but it was there. Walter listened in silence until his patience thinned. "I know how discovery works, Mr. Reed. I need you to treat me as your attorney, not your employee." Something in Walter's tone made Marcus pause. For the first time, he truly looked at the man across from him. Behind the janitor's uniform was a razor-sharp legal mind, untouched by decades of neglect. Marcus exhaled slowly. "You're right. I'm sorry." Together, they combed through boxes of files. Walter's eyes, keen and methodical, caught something Marcus had missed. "These responses are incomplete, and here, technical specs redacted in key areas. Did your lawyers do this?" Marcus leaned forward, alarmed. "No, those files prove I developed the technology independently. They should be complete." Walter's face hardened. "Then someone deliberately sabotaged your case. Your own attorneys weren't defending you. They were burying you." For a long moment, Walter fell silent, staring at the papers but seeing something else entirely. Marcus noticed. "What is it?" Walter hesitated, then spoke quietly. "Your case reminds me of my own past. I was once the rising star at Johnson, Williams & Brown, the first black attorney they ever made partner." His voice grew heavier. "Then I took on a racial discrimination case against Atlantic Energy Corporation, a powerful client of the firm. Suddenly, evidence disappeared, witnesses changed their stories, and before I knew it, I was accused of evidence tampering. They disbarred me. Took 6 years to clear my name. By then, no firm would touch me. The courthouse job, it was all I had left." Marcus listened in silence. For the first time, he began to grasp the weight Walter carried, not just as a janitor, but as a man scarred by a system that had chewed him up and spit him out. Walter's sharp eyes darted to the window, where a black SUV sat idling across the street. "That's not your security," he said flatly. "They're watching you." Reluctantly, Marcus unlocked a wall safe hidden behind a painting. From it, he pulled a slim folder filled with technical diagrams. "Quantum core isn't just an advance in computing," he admitted. "It's a new paradigm. We've built stable quantum processors that operate at room temperature. Do you understand what that means?" Walter shook his head. Marcus's voice was hushed, almost fearful. "It means unlimited computing power with almost no energy cost. Overnight, every other system, traditional computing, telecommunications, even military defense, becomes obsolete. Entire trillion-dollar industries stand to lose everything." Walter let out a slow whistle. "That explains why they want you destroyed. You didn't just build a new technology, you built the key to the future, and to them the future is something to control or kill. If you think Walter's discovery proves this trial is about more than just law, that it's about protecting power itself, comment below. Would you trust Walter if you were Marcus? Hit that like button if you believe truth should never be buried by corruption. By the 3rd week of the trial, the story of the janitor-turned-lawyer had spread like wildfire. Legal blogs mocked him with headlines like, "From Mop to Motion," "Janitor Represents Billionaire," and "Cleaning Up Justice, the maintenance man's legal career resurrected." The prosecution, led by Catherine Williams, strode into court each day brimming with confidence. Their expensive suits, leather briefcases, and smug smiles made it clear they considered Walter nothing more than a sideshow. But Walter didn't rise to their bait. He ignored the whispers, the chuckles, the pointed looks. Instead, he focused entirely on defending Marcus. When James Harrington, CTO of Nexus Innovations, took the stand, he testified with rehearsed ease. He claimed Marcus had stolen prototype designs, snapping pictures of Nexus's technology at the Geneva Tech Summit. The prosecution leaned back, smug, certain the jury was convinced. Walter, however, rose slowly, shoulders squared. He ignored the courtroom's electronic evidence system, outdated technology that had mocked him earlier, and instead spoke with calm authority. "Mr. Harrington, you testified you saw Marcus Reed at the Geneva Tech Summit in June 2022, correct?" "Yes," Harrington said firmly. Walter handed documents to the clerk. "Exhibit A, Mr. Reed's passport stamps and hotel receipts. They prove he was in Tokyo from June 10th to 16th. He has never attended Geneva Tech in any year." The jury murmured. Harrington shifted uncomfortably. "Well, I may have the dates wrong." Walter pressed harder. "Dates wrong or testimony wrong? You swore you saw him, yet these records prove that's impossible." The judge frowned. Harrington stammered. Under Walter's sharp questioning, his confidence crumbled, until he admitted he hadn't personally seen Marcus at all. He had only heard it from reliable sources. Walter leaned closer, his voice cutting through the courtroom. "Those sources. Would they be Catherine Williams and her team who coached your testimony?" "Objection." Williams shot up, her voice sharp. "Sustained," Judge Coleman said quickly. But the damage was done. The jury now looked at Harrington with suspicion. Walter had planted the seed. This was not just a fraud case. It was a manufactured narrative. During lunch recess, Walter stepped outside for fresh air. Two men in dark suits approached, their tone casual but chilling. "Mr. Gibson," one said, "you're making a mistake." Walter narrowed his eyes. "Is that a threat?" The man smiled. "Call it friendly advice. A man your age should be thinking about retirement, not making powerful enemies." The other stepped closer. "Have you checked your apartment lately? Would be a shame if something happened to it." They walked away, leaving Walter unsettled but unbroken. That evening, his small Queens apartment was ransacked. Nothing of value was stolen. Instead, old legal notes and case files had been rifled through. It wasn't a robbery. It was a message. When he told Marcus what happened, the billionaire's face softened with real concern. "Stay here, Walter. I've got plenty of room. You'll be safer." Walter shook his head. "It would look improper. They want to scare me off. It won't work." As they worked late into the night, Walter noticed something chilling. Someone had accessed his old disbarment records. The discrimination case that had destroyed his career decades ago was being dredged up. "They're going to use my past against us," he said grimly. "They know who I am and why I'm dangerous to them." The very next morning, newspapers carried thinly veiled attacks. Headlines questioned whether Marcus had chosen Walter as some kind of diversity hire. Others mocked him as a legal long shot. For Marcus, these slanted stories were an eye-opener. For Walter, they were a reminder this battle was never going to stay inside the courtroom. Realizing he needed help, Walter drove his aging Corolla to a modest brownstone in Brooklyn. Behind its doors lived James Washington, his former mentor, now 87 years old. A civil rights legend, Washington greeted him warmly. "About time you got back in the game," the old man chuckled. When Walter explained Marcus's case, James grew serious. He pulled out a dust-covered folder. "This isn't just about patents. 30 years ago, I uncovered evidence of a secret consortium. Corporations and government officials working together to bury disruptive technology. We called them the Foundation. They destroyed careers, silenced witnesses, even killed people. And Atlantic Energy, the company that ended your career, Walter, was at the center." Walter's blood ran cold. The names in that folder were the same ones surfacing now in Marcus's case. The conspiracy wasn't new. It had been alive for decades. Back in court, Marcus's younger brother, Thomas Reed, appeared unexpectedly. Dressed sharp, watch gleaming, his handshake polite, he told Walter, "I'm here to support my brother." But Walter's sharp eyes noticed something else, a subtle glance between Thomas and Catherine Williams. Later he saw Thomas in a cafe across the street, slipping a note to Williams's team. It wasn't just Marcus's company at risk. His own family had turned against him. That evening, a man in an expensive suit visited Walter privately. His words were smooth, his offer direct. $2 million. Guide Reed toward settlement, and this all goes away. Walter didn't even look up from his notes. No, and if you approach me again, I'll add witness tampering to the charges I'm uncovering. The man left without another word. But the meaning was clear. The closer Walter got to the truth, the more desperate and dangerous his enemies became. If you were Walter, would you keep fighting after being threatened, bribed, and ridiculed? Comment below. 1, for never backing down, or 2, for walking away while you still can. And don't forget to hit like and subscribe for more stories of courage under fire. The deeper Walter dug, the more dangerous things became. It was no longer just a courtroom drama, it was open war. On morning, Marcus's estate security team called in panic. His private server, containing research notes and prototypes, had been stolen during a break-in. Nothing else touched, no valuables missing. It was targeted, precise, and terrifying. Walter's response was grim. They're getting desperate. We must be close to something they don't want anyone to find. That evening, Walter confronted Victoria Hayes, Marcus's impeccably dressed assistant. She had been quietly copying company files. At first, she kept her icy composure, but Walter's persistence cracked her facade. Thomas approached me months ago, she confessed. Thomas. He said Marcus stole his ideas. He pressured me to gather evidence. But when I found nothing, he blackmailed me with my past. Then it got worse. He asked me to plant false documents, and yesterday, I overheard him talking about a permanent solution. Walter's blood chilled. You're saying they're planning violence? Victoria nodded, her voice trembling. I think they mean to kill him. The very next day, Walter was presenting new evidence, offshore accounts tied to prosecution witnesses, when chaos erupted. 2 men burst into the courtroom. One raised a weapon, firing a shot that shattered the glass behind Marcus, missing him by inches. Screams tore through the gallery as security tackled the intruders. Walter's heart pounded as he shielded Marcus, whispering fiercely, "This isn't about patents anymore. This is about survival." Judge Carter looked rattled, his composure shaken for the first time. But when Walter pushed for a mistrial based on prosecutorial misconduct and conspiracy, Carter's rulings consistently bent against them. Evidence favorable to the defense was dismissed on technicalities, while the prosecution was allowed sweeping freedom. Walter's instincts screamed at him something wasn't right. At 3:15 a.m., Walter's phone rang. It was his elderly neighbor. "Walter, come home. Your building is on fire." He raced back to Queens only to find firefighters dousing the flames. His modest apartment was gone. Every photograph, every memory reduced to ash. The fire chief shook his head. Accelerant was used. This was deliberate. Walter said nothing, but inside he knew this was no coincidence. They had moved from intimidation to outright arson. When Marcus heard, he urged Walter again to move into the guest house. Reluctantly, Walter agreed. The war was no longer just legal, it was physical, personal, and deadly. The attacks didn't stop with Walter. His daughter Maya called in tears, "Dad, I've been fired. They said budget cuts, but my boss admitted it's about you. They don't want anyone associated with this case." Walter's chest tightened. "I'm sorry, baby girl." Her voice hardened. "If they're coming after me too, then I might as well help. Tell me what I can do." Walter felt both pride and guilt. Pride that his daughter had inherited his courage, guilt that she was paying the price for his battle. As if the threats weren't enough, the media joined the assault. Headlines dripped with malice. Janitor lawyers' radical past exposed. Is Walter Gibson using Reed to push a social justice agenda? Old photographs resurfaced. Walter at a civil rights rally, his fist raised in protest. Meant to discredit, they instead reminded him why he fought even Marcus. Raised in privilege, began to see the ugly reality Walter had endured all his life. At dinner one night, Marcus commented casually, "You're so articulate, Walter, different from what people would expect." Walter set down his fork. "Different from what they expect from a black janitor, you mean?" Marcus flushed with embarrassment. "I didn't mean, I know you didn't, but you need to think about why it came out that way. That's the world I've lived in for 65 years. For the first time, Marcus listened, really listened, as Walter shared stories of profiling, of teaching his daughter how to survive police stops, of being twice as good just to be considered half as qualified. It was a perspective Marcus had never faced. Until now. Walter's suspicions about Judge Carter proved correct. Digging into his past, Amara digital forensics expert uncovered a shocking truth. Carter had once worked at a law firm tied to several energy giants, now backing Nexus Innovations. Worse, his brother-in-law sat on the board of Atlantic Energy. Walter confronted him directly in chambers. "Recuse yourself, Judge, or I'll file misconduct charges with evidence of your undisclosed ties." Carter's face hardened. "You're making a dangerous enemy, Gibson." Walter didn't flinch. "I've been making those my entire life." Soon after, Carter reluctantly recused himself, but not before the damage was done. The system was rotting from within, and Walter was peeling back its layers piece by piece. As Walter fought in court, Maya fought in the shadows of the internet. She uncovered thousands of bot accounts spreading identical talking points, smearing both Marcus and her father. Fake ordinary citizens filled forums with lies. "I worked with Reed. He's a thief." Or "Walter Gibson is just an angry janitor looking for revenge." "They're poisoning public opinion," Maya explained. "Dad, you're fighting in court. But they're waging war in the court of public opinion. And if they win there, the jury follows." Walter gave her a proud nod. "Then let's fight on both fronts. Would you risk everything to fight corruption, even when your home is burned, your family targeted, and your name dragged through the mud?" Comment 1 for yes, justice at all costs, or 2 for no, the personal price is too high. And hit that like button if you stand with Walter's courage. The courtroom was packed. Reporters jostled for position, cameras flashed, and every seat was filled with spectators, eager to witness what many were already calling the circus trial of the century. But for Walter Gibson, this was no circus. It was war. He had lost his apartment to fire, his daughter had been targeted, and his reputation dragged through the mud. Yet here he stood, a janitor with nothing left to lose, ready to challenge the most powerful corporate and political alliance in America. Marcus Reed sat beside him, no longer the smug billionaire who thought the world revolved around him. The weeks of betrayal, fear, and survival had changed him. He now looked at Walter not as an employee, but as the only man standing between him and ruin. The prosecution was confident. Catherine Williams strutted forward, her designer heels clicking against the marble floor as she delivered her closing argument. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this case is simple. Marcus Reed is not an innovator, he is a thief. He stole ideas, manipulated investors, and now hides behind a janitor masquerading as an attorney. But no amount of theatrics can change the facts. He is guilty, and justice demands you convict him." Her words dripped with disdain as she glanced at Walter, her lips curling in a mocking smile. Walter rose slowly, straightened his worn suit, and approached the jury box. His voice carried the weight of both wisdom and suffering. "I am no one special. I'm not a millionaire. I'm not a celebrity. I'm a janitor. For 20 years I swept these halls, while others decided what justice meant. But let me tell you something, I have watched more trials than I can count. I've seen guilty men walk free and innocent men destroyed, and what I've learned is this: justice only works when people like you, the jury, have the courage to see through the lies." He held up a folder. "The prosecution wants you to believe Marcus Reed stole his technology, but these documents, authenticated by independent experts, prove that Quantum Core's patents predate Nexus's so-called innovations." "What does that mean?" "It means the story you were told was a fabrication." Walter began pacing slowly. "Why fabricate? Because Quantum Core's discovery threatens trillion-dollar industries, energy, telecommunications, defense. Do you really think it's coincidence that every witness against Mr. Reed has ties to those industries? Do you think it's coincidence that evidence vanished, that judges were compromised, that my home was set on fire? No, this is bigger than Marcus Reed. This is about power, and those who have it will do anything, to keep it." He paused, letting the silence sink in. His voice softened. "I know what it means to be crushed by this system. I lived it. They took my career, my reputation, nearly my life, but I stand here today to say, you don't have to let them do it again. You don't have to let corruption win. He leaned closer to the jury. Marcus Reed isn't perfect, but perfection isn't on trial. The truth is. And the truth is simple. He didn't steal anything. He built something that scared the powerful. That's why they want him gone. That's why they want me gone. And that's why I'm asking you, don't give them what they want. Walter's final words hung in the air like thunder. Deliver justice, not for me, not for Marcus, but for the truth. Hours stretched into eternity as the jury deliberated. When they returned, the room fell silent. The foreman stood. On the charge of fraud, we find the defendant, Marcus Reed, not guilty. Gasps, cheers, and cries erupted. Catherine Williams's face turned ashen. Walter's fists tightened at his side, not in triumph but in vindication. But it wasn't over. Amara, the digital forensics expert, had prepared one final surprise. She submitted files showing offshore bank transfers, millions paid to prosecution witnesses, to Judge Carter's relatives, even to Nexus executives. The courtroom exploded with outrage. Judge Coleman, restored after Carter's recusal, issued immediate orders. Arrests for perjury, investigations into corporate collusion. The web of conspiracy, carefully hidden for decades, had finally been dragged into the light. Outside, cameras swarmed. Reporters shoved microphones in Walter's face. "Mr. Gibson, how does it feel to win?" Walter shook his head. "It's not about winning. It's about justice. And justice isn't something you win. It's something you fight for every single day." Marcus stepped forward, standing shoulder to shoulder with Walter. "He saved me, not just from prison, but from myself. I thought money could buy truth, but it can't. Only courage can, and this man has more courage than anyone I've ever known." In the weeks that followed, indictments rocked the corporate world. Atlantic Energy's stock plummeted. Nexus Innovations' board faced federal investigations. And Walter, for the first time in decades, his name was spoken with respect. Law schools invited him to speak. Civil rights organizations honored him. His daughter, Maya, proudly stood by his side, no longer in fear, but in admiration. Yet when asked if he would return to law full-time, Walter only smiled. "I think I'll keep cleaning floors. Someone's got to remind these halls what justice really means." The story of Walter Gibson spread far beyond the courtroom. To some, he was the janitor who became a lawyer again. To others, he was proof that the smallest voices could topple the mightiest giants. And to Marcus Reed, he was more than an attorney. He was a friend. Walter had defended him in court, but more importantly, he had defended the very idea of justice itself. Would you want to see more stories of ordinary people doing extraordinary things? Hit like, subscribe, and share this video with someone who believes courage can change the world.